Imagine discovering the same person wrote both a glowing 5-star review and a scathing 1-star review of the same restaurant. Right? And man, both of them. That's exactly what happened with one of history's most important Byzantine historians. And the contradiction reveals something profound about how power shapes truth. Procopius wrote 3 works about Emperor Justinian. In one, Justinian is a capable ruler managing a vast empire. In another, he's literally a demon who walks the palace halls without a head. In the third, he's practically a god on earth. Same author, same subject, same decade. The question isn't which one is true. All 3 are true. True reflections of what it meant to live and write under absolute power. The contradictions don't obscure history. They reveal it. Let's examine each work. The Wars is a multi-volume military history in the tradition of Thucydides, the ancient Greek historian who pioneered evidence-based analysis. Procopius writes soberly about Justinian's campaigns and his brilliant general Belisarius. The tone starts admiring, then history intervenes. Right? The Italian campaign drags on for decades. In 542, plague kills roughly a third of Constantinople's population. Procopius's tone shifts from admiration to unease to outright blame. The secret history, titled Anecdota in Greek, meaning not to be published, was intended for release after Procopius's death. Here, Justinian becomes a monster. Empress Theodora, a demon-possessed former prostitute. This text survives in only one manuscript. Buildings is a panegyric, a formal public praise text celebrating Justinian's architectural achievements. It's slavishly adulatory, the polar opposite of the secret history. Here's what makes this remarkable. These weren't written decades apart by a man who changed his mind. Evidence suggests Procopius wrote them roughly simultaneously, the same person praising and condemning the same ruler at the same time. How is this possible? When tremendous power concentrates in one person, human responses polarize. You get either forced public adulation or secret, venomous hatred, often from the same people. Consider Stalin's 70th birthday in 1949. Moscow's greatest museum was converted entirely to displaying gifts from a grateful people, paintings, sculptures, poems, an avalanche of worship. Simultaneously, some of the best jokes in Russian history circulated about Stalin, despite telling them risking execution or exile to the Gulag. This isn't hypocrisy, it's the psychological reality of absolutism. Public expression and private belief diverge completely. Procopius's contradictions aren't ancient weirdness, they're a universal pattern wherever power becomes absolute. But there's another layer. Procopius wasn't a neutral observer forced into contradiction by circumstance. He had an agenda. Procopius was a conservative representing landowning, senatorial interests. He despised what he saw as upstarts, people who rose above their station. Justinian came from peasant stock. Theodora came from the theater and entertainment class, the lowest social tier. Antonina, wife of the general Belisarius, had similar origins. To Procopius, these people had no business ruling an empire. His secret hatred wasn't just about tyranny. It was about class resentment dressed up as moral outrage. The Theodora example exposes this bias perfectly. Procopius condemned Theodora for allegedly being a prostitute in her youth. He also condemned her for suppressing prostitution once she became empress, building shelters for former sex workers, and creating paths out of the trade. Both can't be moral failures. If prostitution is wrong, then suppressing it is good. If helping former prostitutes is wrong, then being one isn't uniquely shameful. The contradiction reveals that Procopius's real complaint isn't moral. It's that someone from Theodora's background dared to hold power. Even Procopius's supernatural claims reveal his biases. He reports that Justinian was seen walking through the palace without a head, a demon in human form. This imagery isn't drawn from Christian demonology. It comes from older pagan traditions. Procopius, though nominally Christian, wrote in a classical literary tradition. When he reached for ways to describe evil, he instinctively used pre-Christian imagery. His education shaped his hatred. Even his insults carry the fingerprints of his social position. So what do we do with a source like Procopius? We read him not for the truth, but for what his contradictions reveal. When you encounter any primary source, ask 3 questions. First, what could the author safely say? Procopius could praise Justinian publicly, but not criticize him. The secret history existed precisely because public criticism was impossible. Second, what did the author want to believe? Procopius's elite background made him predisposed to see upstarts as villains and traditional aristocracy as virtuous. Third, what literary tradition shaped the telling? Procopius wrote as a classical historian, which determined everything from his vocabulary to his supernatural imagery. Apply this framework and Procopius becomes more valuable, not less. His praise tells us what the regime demanded. His hatred tells us what the elite resented. His classical style tells us how educated Byzantines understood their world. The contradictions aren't bugs, they're features. They reveal the psychological landscape of the past as vividly as any battle or treaty. Next time you read ancient history, remember, you're not reading what happened, right? You're reading what one person, under specific pressures, with specific biases, using specific literary conventions, chose to record. This approach transforms how we read all historical sources. A medieval chronicle praising a king tells us about court expectations. A revolutionary pamphlet condemning a tyrant tells us about opposition ideology. Neither gives us unfiltered reality, but both give us something equally valuable: access to how people experienced and interpreted their world. Procopius lived through plague, endless war, and absolute power. He responded by writing 3 incompatible accounts of his era. In that incompatibility is itself historical evidence, evidence of what it cost to think and write under the shadow of an emperor who might be god or demon. Procopius himself captured this vertigo. Writing about the Persian sack of Antioch, he confessed, "I grow dizzy when I write of such suffering. I cannot understand why it is the will of God to exalt the fortunes of a man or place him and cast them down for no reason that we can see." Even in his confusion, Procopius reveals something true: the disorientation of living through history without knowing its meaning. That confusion, preserved across 15 centuries, connects his experience to ours.